Greetings. Howdy.
How's it going, Councilmember Robinson?
Hello, Harrison. Doing okay. How are you today?
Good.
Thanks for your comments earlier. That was great.
Yeah, I didn't think we were expecting that many people to send in comments today.
I'll tell you what, I wasn't expecting to chair the thing. I got a text message from Commissioner Clark, the chairman, last night after 8 p.m. saying, family emergency, do you mind chairing tomorrow morning? That was after I'd spoken with the mayor and the director of the Houston Galveston Area Council. So it was a little bit much to my surprise, but glad to be able to jump in.
Well, it ran pretty smoothly this morning.
Pardon me?
It ran pretty smoothly, so.
There were a few moments where it wasn't fun. There's Madeline and Eunice. How are you women today? Ladies.
Hi, so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here with us. Apologies, I was just making sure all our technology is set up and all of our preparations are ready. We are actually live, so I think now is a good opportunity for us to just kind of introduce ourselves, and then we can begin our presentation in just a moment.
Here comes
hello, everyone.
Laura coming on the call too. So I'll mute myself, but Laura's here, and thank you very much, Madeline.
Do we know if anyone else is joining us? This is it for today.
I think Councilmember Abby Kamen is joining.
Okay.
Let me figure out why I am on backlit.
Eunice, if you're ready, we can begin the portion of presenting. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I also want to say hi, hello. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. We really appreciate it and hope that we can have a lively discussion.
Absolutely. Very excited to have everyone here. I am going to begin this portion of Zoom. We have everyone now. So good to see everyone. I'm going to just share my screen.
Looks like my colleague, Councilmember Abby Kamen, very capable of District C, is getting online.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Madeline, how are you?
Hi, so good to see you. Not see you, but speak to you. I'm well, how are you?
Good. Your family doing okay?
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for checking. How are you guys, you and your husband?
We're good. Everyone's doing well.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. I love getting the District C email updates. Okay, Eunice and I have a kind of presentation. We're gonna talk for a couple minutes and then we'll do our question portion. So to start off, thank you so much everyone for joining us. My name is Madeline Canfield. I'm a high school senior. I am an actions lead and climate strike organizer with Sunrise Movement Houston. We are live streaming right now, and I'm here with Eunice Acey if she wants to introduce herself.
Hi, hello, my name is Eunice Acey. I'm one of the hub coordinators for the Sunrise Houston Movement hub. I am a sophomore in college.
Yes, so we're here presenting about doing a live stream as part of the Earth Day, 3 days of Earth Day Live. This is our local content. It is in lieu of being able to go to a quality of life or any other very formal, open to the public City of Houston City Council presentation of the Climate Action Plan. We are going to be talking about what the Houston Climate Action Plan is and why it's really important to us. And thank you so much to Councilwoman Abby Kamen, Councilwoman David Robinson, and Chief Sustainability Officer Laura Cottingham for joining us today to talk about this plan. Eunice, if you want to talk about Sunrise.
But Madeline, if I may, Councilmember Robinson here, just wanting to say briefly, it's really great to be invited and it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm going to do my best to hang on the line, but I am still working, so I'm going to try to hang on as long as I can. And thank you very much for all you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on with us. So the Sunrise Movement.
So the Sunrise Movement is a national movement to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. We're building an army of young people to stop climate change. And what we've done so far, specifically in Houston, we've had a number of strikes, and we've helped kind of bring a lot of people together to bring the issue of climate change to the forefront all over the country, but also specifically in Houston by, again, having our strikes and going before the city council. I know Councilman Robinson, we've met a couple of times. So that is what we do. And if you want to learn more about us, specifically our hub, we have a website at sunrisemovementhtx.org.
So as many of you, I'm sure if you're joining us on this live stream, you understand how close to heart and close to home the issue of climate change and the climate crisis is to us Houstonians. We have this quote right here: Houston has experienced 6 federally declared flooding disasters during the past 5 years, which produced what we have dubbed 100-year and 500-year floods, which just means that in any given year, the storm was of a magnitude statistically likely to happen. They had a 1 in 100 or a 1 in 500, as was more common, or in terms of Hurricane Harvey, even the 1 in 1,000 likelihood of occurring in any given year. So the fact that we had such these floodings happening in succession in years following one another shows this is so statistically improbable that it is. When we look at them, you can go back and do the research and see that Hurricane Harvey, for example, was 15% more likely to happen because of the climate crisis and was 3 times as strong. So the 3 times as likely and 15% more intense. And we have in 2015, we had the Memorial Day flood, we had the Halloween Day flood in 2015 as well, just a couple months later. We had the Tax Day flood in 2016, 2017, we had Hurricane Harvey, and then Tropical Depression Imelda in 2019. And who knows what 100, 500-year flood we will be seeing this year. As you can see, these floods are intensifying, and as a 18-year-old who has lived here nearly my entire life, I can tell you that in my memory, that even just in my own memory, we had not been experiencing such floods with such frequency. And so the climate crisis is really now enshrined in the memory of growing up for my generation of Houstonians. If you look at these images, we're seeing highways and streets and neighborhoods becoming rivers and oceans, and the absurdity and just almost the incomprehensibility of such rampant flooding and of how the climate crisis is manifesting in our community. It just has radically transformed the way we think of rain and the way we act around climate. A lot of communities across the country and across the globe have made pacts like what we have in our city. We have mayors, we have cities trying to pass climate action plans and declare climate emergencies and all these different policies, but specifically in our community, we see the crisis differently because we are on the front lines. So the climate change, if we can see, this is a graphic that Eunice and I pulled from the Houston Climate Action Plan that depicts both sides. So when we talk about climate change, of course, we have to talk about the causes and the impacts. And so baseline, the climate crisis is a result of the planet warming to, right now we have already about 1 degree above pre-industrial levels of warming, of just temperature. And the International Panel on Climate Change released a report in 2018 that stated that if we do not reduce our emissions by 45% globally by 2030 and by 100% in reaching net neutrality by 2050, we will warm to over 1.5 degrees Celsius. And 1.5 degrees Celsius is the temperature associated with just really the most intense climate disasters and climate disruptions across the globe. And so we get these emissions from, you'll see things in this graphic like poor air quality has to do with pollution. Heat is a result of warming. Flooding is a result of the fact that the more carbon in the air and the hotter the temperatures over the oceans, storms can brew more intensely, and then we just get such more intense storms that dump gallons and gallons of water, far more than we're used to. We get it from waste and from traffic because, again, of pollution, developmental sprawl, and fossil fuel power plants. This is all about how sprawl has to do with the fact that you use more emissions to transport yourself. And then, of course, fossil fuel power plants are the result of the fact that here's the high concentration of emissions. In the climate movement, we talk about how 71% of global emissions are emitted through the activities of 100 companies. So we really see how plants and companies causing a lot of the emissions that we are suffering from today. And so mitigation looks like a lot of different activities and projects and human ingenuity and innovation. We need to have renewable energy and sustainable energy. Of course, there needs to be a decrease in waste. There needs to be communities that have resiliency. This is really important because the climate crisis does not impact everyone equally. I think it's a common topping point that everyone should care about the climate crisis. Everyone should care about climate change because it impacts everyone, regardless of who you are and where you come from. And this is true to an extent, but the climate crisis does not impact everyone equally. It disproportionately impacts low-income communities, communities of color, people with pre-existing health conditions and disabilities, communities like Houston, and certain communities in Houston that are very flood prone. You see it in many different ways. And so resiliency is a vital part of climate action. We need urban gardens, and we need transportation that is efficient so that we are not wasting mileage by polluting more than is necessary. When your cars only travel a certain number of miles per gallon, that is a waste of carbon and a waste of natural gas. So we also need to flood proof and make this is room for the bayou. So if you see on the right hand side of this graphic, it's color coded in green and blue. Mitigation is efforts that are designed to reduce the impacts of climate change by decreasing our emissions, so by decarbonizing. The green stuff is about adapting to the realities of the climate crisis that we have failed to act in time to prevent. Now we are going to share a couple, and I'm going to get off of this, apologies, PowerPoint for a moment. We'll get back on in a second, but I wanted to show you guys some of the testimonies. Our Houston Climate Strike and Sunrise Movement contingency collaborated on a project to ask people to explain why they support urgent climate action. So I just kind of wanted to share some stuff with you. This person obviously wrote a very long explanation, but you can see something very quick. We have a choice as individuals to take care of what is around us and appreciate the value of Earth, or we can take clean air and water for granted and focus on material things such as yada yada, things that are long overdue because of COVID. Clean air, clean water, and even shelter are not guaranteed to everyone in the world, nor America, nor Houston, and climate change is a part of the problem. It seems crazy to try to convince someone that a practically unseen evil of climate change is part of the reason forest fires are burning hotter and stronger than ever, while blizzards can get cold in the North Pole. It seems so difficult. They're writing about apocalyptic explanations, but this is the reality for those of us. Climate change is caused by pollution of our environment. Climate change is a big problem with a lot of causes. They write about supporting a climate action plan for a city. We are supporting the belief that we must take action against climate change, then our city can create regulations for us that will decrease our carbon footprint while making infrastructure like energy and transportation more efficient and thus less wasteful. You don't have to leave to me, climate action is about turning our thoughts of gratitude, no matter how small a moment, for the earth that we can take for granted into tangible action so that others can see replicated and spread these actions so that in the end, we still have an earth with living people on it to appreciate and be grateful for. Someone else says, I support urgent climate action because Houston is one of the most important frontline communities, especially the greater Houston area. We need to show that the path towards a green future can occur in a beneficial way for all individuals and businesses. I can say that there is no hope for us to pursue a climate action plan and make the changes that Houston seeks without the leadership of the city of Houston. This is referring to neighboring counties and cities. Given the timeliness of acting on climate change and decarbonizing our society, this plan cannot wait any longer. We must act now, etc. We can see, living on the front lines of the crisis, Houston youth understand the urgency of our need for comprehensive climate action better than oath.
Madeline, if I could interrupt, I'd like to just be clear about the
implementation of this
availability that I have this
bit of testimony, and I want to kind of hand it off now to Eunice to talk more about our focus area, the focus areas and goals that we have extracted from reading over the climate action plan. For those of you who don't know, the plan in its final draft was released on Wednesday in honor of Earth Day. So I'll hand it off to Eunice.
Thank you so much, Madeline, for this beautiful summary and just encompassing the issue and the scale of the crisis that we're facing. But I believe Councilman Robinson has something he was trying to say real quick, so I'll just pass it on to him.
Thank you, Eunice. And Madeline, thank you for that reading into the record there. And I really appreciate this. I'd just love to take advantage of the time that I have to be with you, which I think now is coming down to about 5 or 8, maybe 10 minutes max. So if there is a question or something I can do, and I'm not quite sure about what Councilmember Kamen's schedule is like, but if I can help you, hopefully with short notice to be here with you tonight, I would love to pledge to be here with you the next chance we can schedule maybe a longer period of time when I can provide some feedback. But if otherwise, thank you very much. And I'd love to be able to address any questions you have for me, or otherwise look forward to scheduling something with you soon and in the future.
Absolutely. So I think Eunice just had like 5 more minutes of discussion, but we can ask you our kind of primary question before you have to go first. Really the main question that we have for you today is, what steps and efforts is your city council administration taking to prioritize the implementation of the climate action plan? How will the climate action plan, how will it become what role will it play in your job as the at-large city council member for that large too? And how will the role that it plays in your administration and your city practices, how will that connect with what you're doing kind of more broadly with all of your colleagues?
Well, thank you, Madeline. That's a great question. I want to make one point of clarification, just because it's definitely not my administration. We have what we refer to as a strong mayor form of government, and I'm not the mayor. I'm Councilmember Robinson, and I do serve at large position 2. So that's all 2.3 million of all the Houstonians. And my council member, what's nice about being here with Councilmember Kamen is that I am her council member, as I'm an at-large citywide, and she is my council member because I live in District C. I think, like I heard you say you do. So we have a nice, what do you call that, symbiotic relationship where we help one another, and we also I think are aligned very similarly and politically and ethically and in a number of ways. So I love my new council member colleague. I think it's also a question you're asking about our, principally for our Chief Sustainability Officer, Laura Cottingham, who's also on the line and who's been an incredible champion for the issues that are outlined in the Houston Climate Action Plan. So I think the CSO can attest to the fact that I've been a big advocate for this plan. I consider myself a tree hugger. I think we are in new times, unique times in this world. And as much as we might embrace that, I'm very excited. You know, this is 2 days after the city of Houston released its climate action plan. And I thought the mayor had some good timing with Earth Day, but at the same time, I have spoken with Laura about, you know, it's a little bit of a surprise, I think, to her and to she and we, and we're all trying to think about the next steps because we are, of course, in the midst of this unique situation. It is the COVID-19 crisis. It is a disaster unlike any other in the history of humankind. And I think the Sunrise movement is an important undertaking that we're all working on together to support the good work that this group is doing. So I'm going to advocate for this. I think Lara and I have been talking today already about how this is going to come forward with the administration, with the mayor's office and his support and blessing, how he would like to see it. And Madeline, to your question and concern about how we will do this as a council, I know Councilmember Kamen is the chairman of the Public Safety Committee. I chair the so-called TTI Committee for Transportation, Technology, and Infrastructure. And I believe that yesterday at council, we decided that this would be taken on by the so-called Quality of Life Committee, which up until this new term, I was the vice chair of, now chaired by my colleague and friend, Councilmember Robert Gallegos. And perhaps the way our Chief Sustainability Officer and I are speaking about this, we're going to figure out where that subject matter best fits for how we can present it to the public comprehensively, and what we should do to address all of the points of the climate action plan because of the importance. So that's sort of a long answer to the question you offered, but I want to do whatever I can to support it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I want to extend the opportunity to Councilwoman Kamen if she wants to share what her team is looking forward to doing with the climate action plan in terms of, you know, how it will play into her tenure on city council.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline. And I'm happy to hold my remarks until Eunice is done with her, the remainder of the presentation. But while Councilmember Robinson is here, I just want to personally say, as we sit around the horseshoe, he is very much aligned and in support of the values that we all have in terms of pushing and tackling climate change head on. So you have a very diverse group on council, but we are all very vocal, and Councilmember Robinson certainly is one of the stronger voices on council when it comes to that. And I know that we are all very grateful for his partnership in that. So I just wanted to convey what you're hearing from Councilmember Robinson really is a true commitment to making sure that our city, our state, our country, and our world is moving forward in the right direction for future generations. And we really appreciate that. So I'll hold the remainder of my comments and I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Laura is as well. Laura,
well, let me jump in here real quick for everybody. Councilmember, thank you very much for those kind remarks. And as I need to get back to what I was doing, I do look forward to working with this group and being responsive to any questions you have. I pledge my staff's time, as they say, you know, don't promise anything, but we will get on it as best we can. And we mean it. These are important objectives and considerations. We're all, you know, looking at the shared screen here with transportation, energy transition, building optimization, materials management. I am an architect. I'm actually, my daughter was making fun of me because I'm wearing some bling. I've got my medallion here for being a fellow in the American Institute of Architects that I've put on this morning because I was mostly off the video today, but we've had a long day And Councilmember Kamen and I think truth be told, we're texting here, and I haven't had breakfast yet. So I'm grateful for all of you, and I'm going to get back to it. But I know Madeline, and thank you, Eunice. You're in very capable hands, and Harrison, thank you for all you're doing, and everybody out there, thanks very much.
Yes, thank you so much. If Eunice is ready and able, I think we can kind of do an overview of some of the climate action plan goals, and then we will have some specific questions to ask about the details to both Councilwoman Kamen and Chief Officer of Sustainability Lara Cottingham. Is Eunice's mic working?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, awesome.
Wonderful. So yeah, thank you, Madeline, and thank you, Councilman Robinson. So right now, I'm just going to do a very quick overview of the climate action plan and the things that the goals that it sets for Houston. It's going to be essentially going over all the main goals and the main methods of achieving these goals and who's going to be helping with the climate action plan. So the climate action plan is part of the bigger city resilience plan for the city of Houston that tackles a lot of the issues dealing with Houston and how to become a more resilient and more socially just city. The climate action plan specifically focuses on creating a plan to make Houston a carbon neutral city by 2050. And the way that it does this is that it has identified 4 main areas that are responsible for the majority of greenhouse gas emissions in Houston. Those areas are transportation, energy, buildings, and materials management. So within each of these focus areas, they have set 3 different goals that will help the city of Houston become more resilient and more sustainable. So within transportation, the first goal is to shift all regional fleets to electric and low emission vehicles. The second goal is to reduce vehicle miles traveled per capita. The third goal is to provide equitable and safe mobility choices. For energy transition, the first goal is to grow Houston's investment in renewable and resilient energy. And maximize savings. The second goal is to expand investments in energy efficiency. The third goal is to invest in skilled local jobs to operate building operations. And for materials management, the first goal is to reduce waste and transportation, to reduce waste and transform the circular economy. The second goal is to optimize waste operations and create power from waste. And the third goal is to ensure safe and cost-effective long-term disposal capacity. So within each of these goals, there are different targets set. This will, of course, allows the city of Houston to give itself not just things that it wants to accomplish, but also deadlines to accomplish these things. Because as the IPCC has told us, we don't have forever to reduce our carbon emissions. So we need to set very strict, timely goals in order to actually be able to reach our greenhouse gas reduction goals by 2050. So for transportation, by the way, I'm going to go over each of these targets just to give our general viewers, people who are not necessarily don't necessarily have any exposure to the climate action plan, a general idea of what is happening with the plan. So if you go back. So for transportation, the first goal has a target of converting non-emergency light-duty municipal fleets to 100% electric vehicles by 2030. The second goal target is to reduce the vehicle miles traveled per capita by 20% by 2050. And the third goal is to have 0 traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries in Houston streets by 2030, and also to install 500 miles of high-comfort bike lanes by 2025. For energy transition, the first goal target is to create 5 million megawatt hours of local solar energy per year by 2050. The second target is to attract and incubate 50 Energy 2.0 companies in Greater Houston by 2025. And the third target is to plant 4.6 million new native trees by 2030. For building optimization, the first timely target is to adopt the 2021 International Code Council model building by 2025 with a minimum 5-year update. The second target is to double the current number of PACE projects by 2025. The third goal is to have 70% of non-residential buildings operate by trained building operators by 2030. And lastly, for materials management, the first target is to reduce residential waste by 50% by 2040. The second target is to convert municipal solid waste fleet to low emission vehicles by 2030. And lastly, the third goal is to adopt long-range solid waste plans by 2020. So moving to the next slide. So I'm not going to read through each and every one of the sub goals and all different policies and things that need to be adapted in order to reach these goals. But what I wanted to show is that within each of these goals and for each of these targets, there are a number of different organizations, both in the private sector and the public sector and community members who will be responsible for helping achieve the climate action plan. And each of these goals have been ranked as to what type of impact they will have on our greenhouse gas emissions. But what is important to point out in the next slide is this graph essentially showing how each of the 4 focus areas are predicted to affect our greenhouse gas reductions. So you can see how energy transition, transportation, materials management, building optimization, and offset credits are going to help us reach the goal of 100% greenhouse gas reduction from 2014 levels by 2050. And what's also important to note is that before we get to the 2050 goal, the City of Houston has set 2 other goals to help us, 2 benchmarks to help us get there. And the first is to achieve 40% reduction by 2030, and then 75% reduction by 2040. So that essentially sums up the climate action plan as it currently is. What is important to note about the climate action plan after talking to both Lara and a number of other stakeholders is that the document as is meant to be a living document, meaning that this is essentially just a first draft. It is something that they plan on asking all of us essentially to help with and to help create, to also help monitor and see how we need to change it in order to better fit the city's needs.
Thank you so much. We hope that you all got a lot out of just kind of hearing that overview and hearing about why we really believe that climate justice and climate action is fundamental to the well-being and of both Houston as a whole and especially our generation of Houstonians. Now we're going to move into some pre-prepared questions and that we have for both Chief Sustainability Officer Cottingham and Councilman Kamen. And we want to make it, we want to reiterate that for anyone watching the live stream, if you post comments in any live stream, regardless if you are on Periscope or Twitch or Facebook or our Instagram, if you post a comment on any post, we will be watching and we will ask your question live. So to start us off, I'm going to pose this one to Lara. Can you please tell us how your team developed these goals? And Eunice and I will just kind of bounce back and forth, but can you tell us how your team developed these goals and strategies for the climate action plan?
Absolutely. So first, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So thank you so much for putting this together. That was an amazing presentation on the climate action plan. I can tell you that since I have been giving basically a word for word variation on that same presentation for the past several months, it's really neat to hear other people say it for the first time. And so that is a really good sign to me, right? That it's not just something that me and my team have been working on, but other people in the community are excited about and starting to embrace. So I just really appreciate that and the opportunity to help get the word out about the climate action plan, because everything that is going on right now with COVID and the pandemic is just unimaginable. And the fact that we were able to move this forward right now was an incredible effort that took a lot of different parts of our community, making sure that it keeps moving forward. And it's so important that climate change, that climate action keeps moving forward, because we know that while we are all focused on COVID right now, climate change will be there when we're done, right? It is something that is always an issue in Houston. We just had the anniversary of the Tax Day flood. Memorial Day is not too far away. So from our perspective, and it sounds like from your perspective, it's really important that we keep talking about this, we keep working on this as best we can. And when we all can come together again, we'll be able to work even more. So to answer your question about how the goals were selected, how the strategies and actions came to be, the city of Houston started this effort a year ago in January. And we had a big stakeholder meeting where we invited folks from different parts of the community. We invited students and educational institutions. We invited neighborhoods and community leaders. We invited folks from environmental nonprofits. We invited folks from each of those sectors and from small businesses and mega corporations. We wanted a little bit of everything to help us put together strategies for the climate action plan. Because what we have found, and if you look at any kind of policy in the city of Houston, if you don't have buy-in from stakeholders and from community members, from neighborhoods and from business, it will not be successful. My team could have put together a climate action plan in about 2 weeks, right? We could have just done it ourselves. We could have gotten no input and everyone would have hated it, right? So it's just so important you get feedback from the community. So we set up working groups for each of the 4 focus areas, and we told them, here is our end goal, right? We want to be Paris compliant. We gave them a lot of information and materials on best practices. This is what other cities have done. This is what other cities have put in place to start achieving these goals. How would you, Houstonians, how would you put together programs to achieve the same result? Because Houston is a really unique community, and because we have special regulations, because we don't have zoning, a lot of things that work in other cities, if you try to just drop them into Houston, they don't work quite as well. So doesn't mean we can't do them, just means we have to MacGyver them a little bit to find a way to make them fit Houston. So our working group members, Harrison, who was on there, led one of those. It did a fabulous job of finding and putting together recommendations on goals and strategies and actions for how we could reach that end goal of Paris compliant. We put all of that together. We put out a draft last July, and then we put that out for public comment because the working groups were incredible. I cannot stress that enough. They put in so much time, so much of their own time to help us get a really great policy document. But that couldn't possibly include everyone. And so public comment allowed other groups. We had people from other countries, but people who hadn't seen it before to provide more comment and tell us, we like this, we don't like this. And then after a comment period, we took all of that together and we started drafting the actual plan, which looks like this. And the plan is really not a lot different from the draft that you saw in July. The difference is it has narrative, and they really expanded from a Excel spreadsheet to a report to give context, because not everyone knows about the energy transition or about Houston's waste system. And so you had to put context to show how they're all connected and how we all have a role to play in reducing our emissions.
Absolutely. That seems like it was a very painstaking process, and we're all really grateful that you took the time to make it happen and create such a plan that everyone has the opportunity to take part in, that will actually fit Houston as a city. And while we're still on the topic, Harrison, I know you worked on one of the working groups for this. Would you mind describing what that experience was like?
Sure. And it was, as Laura just described, a pretty long process. I think Mayor Turner first announced that we were going to do a climate action plan late 2018. We started convening early 2019, and here we are a year later, it just now being released. The working on the working groups was great. It was, so I work for a nonprofit, Air Alliance Houston. We focus on environmental issues. So it was a convening of people from nonprofits, but technical experts, city staff. My co-lead for the transportation working group with Dr. Bruce Race is a professor at U of H. So it was a good confluence of different voices that came together to really put together some interesting policies that will try to get us to our goals. And then I guess as Laura was describing, one of the most important parts of this process is trying to get community buy-in. And so one aspect of what we did over all of 2019 was go to community meetings and present some of the policies that we had already worked on, but also get policy ideas from community members and workshop what we had, but also integrate what they had to say into what we were working on. So it was a good experience overall. And I think, having to build a climate action plan, this was the way to do it.
Thank you, Harrison, for that. So then the next question is, what is the current implementation timeline for the CAP, and what does the implementation look like over the next 6 months? And this question goes for everybody on call.
Laura, you want to start?
Sure, I will go first. I will give you what our original implementation plan was, and then just understand that I can't guarantee actual timelines and things like that right now because of the current situation, but we are cautiously optimistic that we will come back and be able to catch back up. The plan for implementation is to take the climate action plan. If you look in the back of the plan, there's an implementation section. And so it has the goals, it has the strategies, and then there's another level of even more detail on actions. And we want to have a implementation event where we can bring everyone together from the working groups who had been involved, and also invite other folks who want to learn more, who maybe weren't involved in the putting together the plan, but now that they know about it, they want to plug in. That gives us an opportunity to thank everyone who was involved and also kind of kick off the next section. And so we'll talk more about what the plan does, and then we'll talk about the kind of priorities for what we can work on right now, because the plan identifies things that are shovel ready, right? Things that are the city can do, you can do today. Some things in the plan we're actually doing already right now. And then there's some things that are a little bit in the near term, and then there's some things that may not kick in for a while. And that's okay. Implementation, we start on what we can do today, and our goal is to start bending that curve. So then we would have a implementation event and then ask folks to reorganize into those working groups. Because just like the community came together to help us come up with those goals, and we want that same kind of crowdsourcing energy to help us come up with strategies for how do we accomplish them. Some of the goals in the climate action plan are very specific to a municipal action that will come to city council, and folks like Councilmember Kamen and Councilmember Robinson will have to say yay or nay. And a lot of things in the plan, though, the city has no control over, no control directly or monetarily. And we can still advocate for things, but that's where we need community support so much. And things like if we want more recycling in our communities, if we want to have more renewable energy, either energy you can purchase or solar and things like that. And the city can do a little bit, but we need a lot of community support. Everything in terms of transportation involves the community, because transportation is a very personal decision that you make every single day. So we will keep that action going, only now we have a fairly defined set of goals and objectives. And so we'll break out into groups or whatever, and maybe we'll pick one thing that we want to go after for this year. It's important that it's not like, oh, this year we're going to focus on transportation. There will be transportation things. There will be energy projects. There will be recycling and materials management projects, all going on in conjunction. And there'll be some crossover for sure, but that's okay. Also, in terms of implementation, it's important to mention the resilience strategy, Resilient Houston. A lot of what is in the climate action plan has a direct resilience component, and so we'll work really closely with that. And so some of the implementation activities may be in conjunction with some of their activities, and that's great. We don't want to duplicate efforts. We want to be efficient in what we're working on.
Absolutely. And just as a quick follow-up, you mentioned the implementation meeting. Who will be allowed to go to this meeting? Is it open to everybody, or and how can, if someone's, for example, watching this live stream as a community member and would like to be part of this meeting, how would they go about setting that up?
Yes, fabulous question. So everyone today should go to our website, greenhoustontx.gov, and that's where you can get the plan. That's where you can get all of our materials that go over how we put the plan together. We have every single presentation that we have given timestamped, so you can see how it changed over time. And that's also where you sign up for updates. So if you sign up on that list, whenever we have a meeting, you will get an invitation. It absolutely would be open to the public. We try to have meetings at different times of the day, different days of the week. We know that some people can't go at night and some people can only go at night. Sometimes weekends are good, some people work on weekends. So we try to make them accessible. We also try to have things so you can call in or participate virtually. But for that big kickoff event, I can't tell you much more about what that will look like just yet. We would love to have it at City Hall. We would love to have speakers from some of the organizations who played such a big role. But what we had planned for earlier this year kind of got put on pause, and we will pick it up again once we have a little more guidance as to how we can move forward.
Thank you. Councilwoman Abby?
Yeah, so first off, I want to just recognize and thank Laura. I don't think that there's really a way to wrap our heads around how much work went into, blood, sweat, tears, and excitement went into this plan. And Laura completely spearheaded this entire thing for the city of Houston. And for the fourth largest city, the energy capital of the world, to have come out with a climate action plan is a really big deal. So Laura, thank you for what you're doing. And Harrison, I know the stand that you are for the environment. And to everyone listening, Sunrise is an absolutely critical role in terms of making sure that students' voices are heard with climate change. Y'all are the future, and this is going to impact students and young people more than anyone. And we have to deal with the issue head on now. I also just want to touch base because I know a lot of stuff is getting moved around, including the release of this plan because of COVID, but I think it's important that we look at the impacts of climate change moving forward on disease and pandemics. And there's an intrinsic tie between them, and we will continue to see an increase and rise in disease and viruses that spread faster as the climate continues to warm. So I don't want to lose sight of what the future may hold if we don't tackle climate change. And I think it's really important what Laura mentioned in terms of the timeline. For example, with trees and forestation, right? Houston's tree canopy is one of our most valuable assets in terms of cooling concrete down, purifying air, but also purifying water. And even over Arbor Day, the mayor launched an initiative, a tree initiative. I forget the formal title of it, I apologize, but we launched it in the district at TC Jester Park, where we planted 2,500 trees. And that's going to happen. Thousands and thousands of more trees over the next few years are going to be planted along our bayous to not only purify water, but help with flood mitigation and air quality. So there's a lot of different things that are happening. And now that we have this framework to work under, it's going to be even more powerful. One of the things that my office is working on, climate change is a top priority, but even just training people that come to City Hall to look through a climate lens. So for example, if a developer comes to meet with us, we're asking, what green infrastructure are you putting in? What are you doing to remove carbon from the atmosphere? And all of those questions. And the more that as a council, we start to apply those types of questions to all these different things, people will start to hopefully shift the way in which they relate to tackling climate change so that it becomes inherent in the way that we do business at the city.
Thank you so much, both Abby and Laura, for those explanations. We're really so fortunate to have such strong advocates for climate in our city council, and just our Office of Sustainability for putting this plan together. Our next question goes specifically to Councilwoman Kamen. How can the city and the public ensure that future administrations of both city councilors and of the mayor comply with the climate action plan and prioritize it in the future?
It's a really good question. You know, Mayor Turner has been a very strong advocate on climate change. When the current federal administration backed out of Paris, he's actually one of the co-chairs leading all of the mayors nationwide in a commitment to the Paris Accords, regardless of what the federal government does. So first and foremost, elections matter. The mayor is currently term limited. He's in his second term. So in 4 years, there will be another mayoral election. And it is very important that we elect someone that is committed to the principles and action that we need to see in order to have a more resilient Houston for future generations and for our own livelihood. So first message is elections matter. Every level of government matters. So your state representatives matter. The governor matters, right? In terms of environmental regulations and rollbacks, the governor has tremendous power, and so do the state level agencies. And at the federal level, it also matters. So one, it's voting, really. Two, it's holding government accountable. And also, I would say, given that we don't know who the next mayor is, and it's a strong form of mayoral government, getting as much done and in place as we can right now through this plan, so that the path is already paved and we are locked into a transformative process for the environment.
Thank you so much for that that response. The next question comes from a live viewer. Marco Garcia, who is a student at University of Houston, has posed this question to Laura Cottingham. Would the city and would the Office of Sustainability consider going to high schools or colleges or middle schools to talk about the climate action plan and what young people can do to get involved?
Absolutely. We would love to go anywhere to talk about this plan. We have an open invitation to anyone that wants to learn about the plan, that wants a presentation from my office or my team. And honestly, schools are the hardest part. They're one of the hardest sectors for us to get into, because in Texas, school districts are their own kind of governmental entity. And there are so many things going on that kids need to learn about. Climate change is definitely one that is very important, but it's hard to compete with all of these things and the curriculum and the time frame. And so the best way that you can help us be able to get that message out is to invite us to come. Invite us to your club meetings, invite us to your science classes. I mean, whatever it is, we can be there before school or after school. We would love to come and talk with you guys. And we would love to help you come and talk to your city council members, because they hear from me all the time. And it is so much more important to hear from folks like you, to hear from their constituents, to hear from our future generations and hear how you all care about this, that you have prioritized this as an issue, and that you guys all see how the pieces come together. That helps inform their decisions. That helps inform the votes they make. And, you know, a meeting you have today may have a huge impact on something that happens 3 years from now. You never know.
And in addition, if I can just add to meeting, I know some of you listening have come to public comment before. Sometimes it's hard because it's in the middle of the day, but the more that you're speaking publicly and openly about this issue, the bigger difference it's going to make.
Thank you so much for that answer. Next, we would just like to ask, kind of turning back to this element of what is in the plan, the details. So a lot of what, from our understanding, a large portion, and this is directed towards specifically Laura Cottingham, but if Councilwoman Kimmo wants to chime in as well, is relies on the public sector. How does both, the history of fossil fuel pollution, but then also this opportunity for innovation play into that? Can you just explain to our viewers more? We can pursue a partnership that still prioritizes the interests of the Houstonians at large who will be impacted by climate change, as opposed to the monetary interests of the industry.
So you cut out there in the middle a little bit, but I think you were asking about how do you balance Houston and our history as not only an oil and gas city, but this global energy capital of the world, with our very real environmental and climate challenges. And how do you take action on one without, drastically upsetting the balance? Is that correct?
Yes, and specifically how partnership with companies and fossil fuel companies is a big part of the plan, and how do we honor both innovation, but then also ensuring that the monetary of the plan of the companies is not superior and prioritized over the interests of the people.
Okay. So I would say a couple of things that's really important to remember about the Houston Climate Action Plan is that the Climate Action Plan looks at emissions that are generated within the Houston city limits. So climate change is a global challenge, and it's going to take global solution. It's going to take action from every individual, every city, every state, every country, every nation, right? It has to be everywhere. And that's why the Paris Agreement was such a challenge, because when the federal government stepped out, it created this vacuum. And what happened overnight was you saw cities step up, and you saw cities step up because we are the front lines, right? We are the boots on the ground. We were the boats in the water during Harvey. And during the coronavirus pandemic, it's cities that are standing up testing centers. And so when you have these huge challenges, cities really play a very, very crucial and personal role. And so that is why the city has a climate action plan, because cities all across the country and the world realize that you have to start reducing your emissions now. You have to start somewhere. The city of Houston alone cannot stop global temperature from rising, right? That doesn't mean we shouldn't do everything we possibly can. If we do everything we possibly can within the city limits, the policies we put in place will expand. They will impact people that are coming through our city, that will impact people who live outside of the city and work in. And it's all pieces of the puzzle. So I say that to explain the strategies that are in the Climate Action Plan are specifically geared towards reducing the emissions in the city of Houston. So we don't talk about hydro projects because we don't have any in the city of Houston. We don't really talk about oil and gas production because we don't have much in the city of Houston. We talk about transportation emissions. We talk about buildings. We talk about our waste system. We talk about the power that we use, but we don't talk about the power plants so much in terms of what technology or how they should be permitted or things like that, because they're outside of our jurisdiction. So they're all connected, but it helps to really think about it at that level in terms of the things that we prioritize. Now, we definitely do talk about the energy sector, and we talk about that because that is our history, right? Houston is proud to be the energy capital of the world, and we want to continue to be the energy capital of the world. But we all know that a global energy transition is happening. And so everyone from you and me to the mayor needs to work to make sure that Houston leads that global energy transition. And part of that means building a low energy economy, low carbon economy. And so that is something that the city can help with in terms of building our innovation economy. how are we making Houston the most attractive city possible so that startups choose to move to Houston and not Silicon Valley, not Austin, right? And Houston is every bit as amazing, and in a lot of ways we are more amazing. So we need to let folks know, right? We also talk a lot about partnering with industry to help fund and to help spread the word about some of the projects that we're doing. When you talk about buildings, you can make a building efficient. It doesn't matter if there are oil and gas companies in that building or if there are grocery stores or banks, or a building is a building. And so we need their input. They will help us reduce our emissions. A lot of commuters in the city of Houston, a lot of cars driving around are employed by oil and gas companies. And so they are crucial partners to make our programs successful. So we talk a lot about that. Then we also talk about how the companies that are based in Houston, if from a thought leadership perspective, if they can truly embrace this idea of energy transition, of reducing their emissions, if they make the commitments like you're seeing companies make every single day, more and more and more of them, they have the opportunity to not only reduce emissions here in Houston, but in cities everywhere across the country and across the planet. And so that is the huge opportunity that Houston has that other cities don't have. That's not something that the city has a direct control over. But we talk about that because that is so crucial to the future of Houston's economy, right? And so we all want Houston to take this leading role in the global energy transition, in reducing emissions, and building a new low carbon economy.
And Laura, if I could chime in just a little bit, Houston is a business town, right? We are a big business town, and our oil and gas companies are a big component of that. I think you are starting to see a shift, and we do have to bring the business community together. And that's why I think the Climate Action Plan has done a really good job of bringing a lot of different groups to the table to start these conversations. We've seen a clear shift taking place in Houston. So one example of that, some of you may be familiar, it's called the Greater Houston Partnership. It's the largest chamber of commerce. It's a big group of businesses that come together, and they're represented through the partnership. The incoming chair of the partnership in his opening speech in front of hundreds of business leaders across the city of Houston was about tackling climate change and the business partnerships that have to take place to do that. And it's in the interest of business here in Houston, including our oil and gas companies, to diversify within the energy sector here, right? If we want to continue to be the energy capital, we have to diversify. We have to attract green jobs, both tech and manufacturing and all of the above. So we are starting to see a shift within business. One example, Shell actually sponsored Houston's resiliency plan and helped provide the funds to bring a chief resiliency officer for our city. And Laura works very closely with her, Marissa Aho. So we are starting to see a shift in the way in which the business community at large and our business partners are relating to this. We still have a long ways to go, but I think that the opportunity is there right now. I think at the state level and maybe at the city level, if we can figure it out, we have to figure out a way to incentivize a lot of these changes. So there's incentives in green building, but we also need incentives in green jobs and things of that nature. So it has to happen at every level, but we are starting to see that shift. We just need to see that shift happening faster before we run out of time. And speaking of time, I'm going to have to sign off in a minute. I apologize. I have to keep working on some district related things. If there's any final questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I do want to flag one area in Madeline's presentation at the beginning, and Eunice, both of y'all were fantastic. There's a lot of focus in our city on flooding, and we have to continue to focus on flooding and the impact of climate change and the increasing storms and the severity of storms. But another issue or area that we really have to be looking at as a city and the climate action plan does this, the resiliency plan does this, is talking about drought and fire. The state of Texas is supposed to have worse forest fires and wildfires than worse than California by 2050. That's something that we're going to have to deal with in a very real way. So we're going to continue to see increased flooding and storms, and we're also going to see increased drought. And the ability for the city to be flexible in addressing those needs is something that we really have to work on. And I know Laura is at the forefront of all of that. So I think it's really exciting what we are doing at the city. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take Sunrise. It's going to take Air Alliance. It's going to take all of the community partners and business partners to work this thing through and get enough change done so that we're not missing our goals in a way that destroys the earth. So. With that, I don't know if there's any more questions for me. If not, I'll remain silent and just say thank you.
Before, I know it's getting time to go, and Councilwoman Kim, if you have to go, that's completely understandable. But I did want to make sure that we ask about a really important part of climate action that is really central to the youth activism, which is understanding and the disparities of how the climate crisis disproportionately impacts low-income communities and communities of color and those with pre-existing health conditions. And just for either one of you, how have those issues been folded into the climate action plan's specifics?
So I'll just say, and Laura will be able to tackle the meat of this. Climate change and environmental issues as a whole absolutely disproportionately impact vulnerable communities, including communities of color, those with that are have pre-existing conditions, and the like. And we have to deal with that in a meaningful way. COVID is the perfect example. Diseases don't necessarily discriminate, right? You get sick, but the way it's no surprise, and it's tragic and absolutely unacceptable that even in the city of Houston, over 50% of the deaths are in the African American and Black community. And we're seeing that trend across the country. And that's because of a lack of access to healthcare, a lack of access to resources, and a whole range of other issues. And we have to be very real in talking about those disparities and work on the equality aspects of this if we want to have meaningful change. And Laura, you may want to talk about the plan specifically, but I do know that the city is really focused on income disparities, among demographic disparities, a whole host of things. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing that we're looking at that.
Absolutely. And the issue of climate justice, climate equity, how do we make sure that those who are most at risk are not repeatedly put at risk is a huge issue in the city of Houston. Absolutely. Every city has challenges like this, but we have some challenges that other cities don't have compiled on top of everything. And so it is something that probably every part of the city of Houston is looking at because climate change adds a risk factor. So we need to reduce that climate risk, but then what has already been done is part of the resilience strategy. And then how do we build those individual communities up so that they are less at risk for the climate changes that are coming? And so it's not just in the climate action plan, it's not just in the resilience strategy. It is in the mayor's Complete Communities program. It is in everything the planning department is doing in terms of working on transportation, safety, and equity and mobility. It is everything that we're working on in terms of complete streets, from bike plans to simple things like sidewalks, all the way up to big challenges like I-45 and all of the various flood control projects, right? So it is embedded in the climate action plan specifically. If you think about it in terms of planning, when you are thinking about new programs, it is very easy to jump to some assumptions that seem the shiny thing that grabs your attention, right? Everyone needs a Tesla and a solar panel. And that solves some of the problems, but if it's not actually available to the vast percentage of your community, it doesn't actually solve your problems. So we look at the different strategies that we're working on, and then how to make sure that they are accessible to the entire community. And if they're not physically accessible, but the entire community still benefits from whatever that strategy or action is. So that's how the climate action plan addresses this. But I do want to make sure you understand that there are lots of other programs outside of this specific plan and this specific framework that are addressing some of those other challenges. And we are all working together because everything is connected. And if one piece pulls this way, it disaligns everything else. And so you have to kind of really, really work in a coordinated effort, and which is something that I have seen develop in the couple of years I've been at the city, and it's a really good positive move forward. And part of that was a result of Hurricane Harvey, that it brought us together within city departments. And I think you're going to see that happen even more after we get through COVID, that departments, are working with nonprofits, are working with corporations. It brings people together, and you learn that you can pull down those silos and that you can work together to achieve goals.
Well, thank you so much for that response. Unless Eunice or Harrison have any further questions, I'm going to say that I think that was a really successful, and we're really fortunate to have had all three of these wonderful representatives of our city on with us this evening. We had over 200 viewers just on Twitter alone, so I'm not sure how many we had on Facebook, presumably more than that. So we had a lot of viewers on with us this evening, which is really exciting, and we cannot wait to engage with all of you in the coming months and over the summer to put together programs to really amplify the youth voice in terms of climate action, especially with the Office of Sustainability. If anyone is interested who was watching this evening in getting involved, please DM us on social media, send us an email, check out our website. We would love to work with you. Eunice and Harrison, any further comments, questions?
Yes,
Just want to reiterate our thanks for joining us, Councilmember Kamen and Laura. We really appreciate your time.
Well, we really appreciate all of y'all and your commitment. We can't do it without you.
Thank you so much.
We would love if you can share, anyone who wants to share their contact information with us, and we will get them plugged in on all of our events going forward. And tell your friends, tell your school classes, anybody you know. We need as much of a network as we can get to help spread the word. So anything you can do to help us, we wanted to work with you as best we can.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us and for extending this arm for all of us that we can be part of the plans implementation. And I just want to say one last thing to everyone, especially watching, that if you would like to go before the city council and maybe afraid or you don't know quite how to do it or quite how to reach out to them, you can simply go to our website, sunrisemovementhtx.org. We have a place where you can sign up to go to see the city council, and we will guide you through the process and help you get set up and be there with you if you need it. But thank you so much for Councilmember Abby Kamen and Laura Cunningham for being here with us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please have a wonderful evening.
Bye.